There we go. We are recording. Hello, Bre.
Amazing.
How are you?
I'm doing amazing. How are you?
I am good. Thank you so much for doing this. I truly appreciate it. And this is it's a big deal for me because we're kicking off our spirituality in practice series in terms of this. You were a guest that I absolutely wanted to have on for a variety of reasons, some of which I'm sure you know, and some I'm going to fangirl you for a second. So very much. So we worked together. We've known each other for a while, but we worked together a little while ago. And you in particular, I wanted to have on for this because it was us working together that very, very much set in motion for me the path that I'm on. And I have no question that that's how it happened and that's how it started. So I'm just so excited to chat with you about it and to chat more with your background, as well as the work that you do and the work that is ongoing as well. So yes, I just had to say that and get that in the beginning because I'm just so excited. So part of this, my first, I guess I want to kick it off with the idea of religion and spirituality. So I grew up at first understanding they were the exact same thing. So I grew up in a European, very traditional upbringing in terms of we were raised Catholic. And as long as you did the things, then I was spiritual, if that makes sense. So if I went to church and I kind of, knew the scripts and I knew those types of things, even in school and attending a Catholic pathway that way in terms of that, I understood the code. I understood it.
Right.
A lot of parts of it really resonated with me and still do. By all means, they very much still do. But I understood it. But in many ways, in looking back on it, I found there was separation. Like there was what I did, what I had to do, the church, the holidays, all that kind of thing. And then I would leave that, walk away from that, and then I would go about my life and never really understanding the integration, if that makes sense, between self and the practice of that. And then it wasn't until, again, working with you, yes, but there were so many steps that kind of led to sort of me connecting back with you, me connecting with you, where I was a lot of questioning, a lot of struggling, trying to understand. One of the first things when you and I chatted was, I remember saying, I feel so disconnected from my body. Like, I feel like this is not my narrative. Like, I feel like there was just so many things that I remember I was going through at that time that kind of led to us connecting. So what I would love to ask you and kind of start this off is that sort of concept of religion and spirituality. And are they different? What are the differences? And just your take on that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm pretty honored that you've reached out to, have me here. So I guess I'll share a little bit about my story and how it kind of evolved into where I am today. So I grew up in a very Christian home. So it was like rules and strict and had church every Sunday and then VBS, so Vacation Bible School in the summer.
Okay.
My siblings went to Christian elementary school, Christian high school, and I was the only one that was like, yeah, this doesn't feel so good. So then of course, like there comes the like wild child, the rebel, the like all these labels, right? And so after a certain amount of time, you start to believe that, and then you act it out throughout your life, right? So that's kind of where that programming comes from, is our parents or our, pastors or ministers or teachers or whatever. So anyways, growing up in a Christian home, I just knew to the core that like something wasn't right, like something wasn't in alignment. And so I just continued to say no. Like I was just like, no, I don't want to go to this. I don't want to go to that. I don't want to celebrate like Easter in that context. Like there was just so many things that just didn't feel good for me, right? So moving along in my journey, I found mindfulness and meditation. So I was asked to guide I worked in a hospital after my master's of social work. And so I was asked to guide a mindfulness and meditation class. And like, I didn't know really anything much about it, barely even heard of the words before, because it was like prayer and God and, all of the kind of religious aspects, right? And so, the most triggering thing that my parents could say was like, you just need to find Jesus and you just need to find, like, pray to God and he'll have the answers for you. I'm like, this, but praying to a man in the sky didn't feel good to me. It didn't feel right. So, again, like all of these things that just didn't feel like truth for me. So I started guiding this class, and I didn't feel comfortable guiding it with no kind of background in that. So I started doing my own research. I started doing my own mindfulness practice, my own meditation practice. So I just really became an expert for myself, right? So that I could feel comfortable guiding other people in these two modalities. And so through that teaching of mindfulness and meditation, I really started to learn a lot about myself. I started to learn why those religious scripts didn't feel in alignment or didn't feel like truth, because it's not that we're praying to a man in the sky. It's that we're really just praying in consciousness of truth, right? So, the I am is all that we are, right? I am that I am. And so if we really come into awareness around this I am consciousness, then we're able to recognize, oh, I am actually made in the image of God. So I am God, right? So I am that Christ consciousness within, and I have that. And so once we start to learn what really, the metaphysics of the Bible or the bigger picture of what the Bible is actually sharing, it's beautiful, right? And so I've been able to release that trigger around the word God. I used to hate it when people would say like, pray to God, or God's going to take care of it, or release your fears to God. I'm like, what the frig is this all about? Right? Like, seriously. So yeah, so I just really realized that like the spiritual aspect is more for me, and it's different for everybody. But for me, it's really about learning about yourself, learning about the I am, right? That consciousness, that Christ consciousness, that I am, the divine being that I am, right? And that it's full of abundance and full of prosperity and full of all of these, wealth and prosperity and truth and abundance of energy, endless energy. And so that's truth, right? But we're not taught that necessarily in church sectors. It doesn't mean the Bible doesn't teach that, right? Because if we look at the bigger picture of the stories in the Bible, they do help us. It's a guideline for our life, and really, love your neighbors as you do yourself, right? That's like unconditional love, no matter what. Right. So yeah, they do have the teachings in it, but because it's being preached by people who are essentially traumatized, right? In the sense of, when I say that, it means that I highly doubt that the preachers that are speaking from the Bible and the scriptures have done their own inner work, right? Their own trauma work. And so they're speaking from that lens. They're speaking from that lens of trauma. And so if they're speaking about like a man in the sky, heaven and hell, then really they're not doing their own inner trauma work and understanding that heaven and hell is just what we create inside of us, right? We can either be heaven on earth and be that bridge, or we can also be our own internal hell, right? With all of the limiting beliefs, with all the thoughts, with all the self-doubt, and with all the negativity, right? But it's just coming down to trauma. So when it comes to really, understanding the difference between religion and spirituality, for me, it was religion is this institution that is teaching based in illusion, where spirituality is only based in truth. It's only coming from a place of alignment in truth. And so what is that truth for me? And so when I do my inner work, my self-processing, it's like, oh yeah, that I'm not good enough statement. Yeah, that's based in a belief system, which we say BS. It's BS because it's not based in truth of who we are as this divine being, as this image of God, right? And so it's like, super important for us to be doing our trauma work, because that's really the separation of it, right? And so there is heaven on earth, and we are creating our reality, but we're either creating it from our lack, right? Our limiting beliefs, or our false beliefs, or self-limitations, right? Or we are in alignment with the truth of who we are, the endless energy, the abundance of everything, right? And so that's all the universe is it's abundance. It only says yes to us. Literally, it only says yes, and so it is. So if you have that in mind with every thought that you have, recognizing, okay, the universe is only going to say yes to that. So if you have the limiting belief of I'm not good enough, the universe says, yep, sure, I'll support that. So then you're only going to be attracting in I'm not good enough experiences, right?
Absolutely. And I think going back to one part about what you said is just growing up, I think it's the very questioning that I don't think is encouraged. Like I remember growing up, and I would, as a child, obviously we're so influenced by our parents. So we go along with what we are told is acceptable, and socially, this is just what you do. This is what we do. And of course, as kids, we take that and we follow. And I remember as a kid not questioning, just, and not even from a place of I believe or don't. I mean, as a kid, you're not on that plane.
No.
You're just questioning what you're told, and you're so inquisitive and you're curious. So I remember asking questions, and I remember a couple of things. I don't remember necessarily word for word responses. I remember feelings. I remember offending. And like, I'm like, oh, but like, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. Like, I'm not trying to offend. And I remember thinking, I'm not trying to offend. I'm just curious. I remember offending. I remember my parents getting very irritated because obviously in hindsight, they themselves can't answer certain questions because they're not sure. Right. So I remember getting irritated. I remember like kind of, I guess it was like an offensive thing. Like I wasn't supposed to be asking that. And then I remember just that kind of, rehearsal of certain expectations. So the questioning of itself, and what I loved what you said is it's not necessarily the scripture, and it's not actually it's not the opposite. It's how it's presented. I think it's how it's taught. And I don't necessarily think the institutionalization of it is necessarily what the original intention of it was.
Totally.
Right. And I think that very much for me is looking back on it. I just stopped questioning, and I was such an inquisitive kid. Like I chatted a lot. I talked a lot. Like I wanted to know things and know everything. And I remember feeling that is a topic. Okay, I don't know that I can go here. Like you know what I mean? And then it just became, okay, so then I'm just going to robotically do what I'm supposed to do. And then that's going to be what it is. Even at school, like even questioning, I mean, it was a bit more encouraged questions, but within a parameter, like within a parameter, we could ask questions, but even then we learned quickly what those parameters were. And then we just became rebellious or behavioral, right?
Exactly.
Like then we got a different label. So depending on, where that student fell on the plane of rebellion and what they were comfortable with is kind of how you got labeled in that construct. Totally. And then something that I definitely want to also touch on that you said that I giggled because that I was very much considered the oddball. Not that I don't want to say black sheep because I don't know if I think that's an appropriate term, but very much that feeling of being different and seeing things differently, even from my siblings in many ways, from other family members, I'm thinking, why is no one else questioning? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why is no one else? Why is this just me? So something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Like, something is wrong with the fact that I am questioning the fact that there is apparently a dude on a cloud somewhere. And not
Yeah.
to say that it's not, or it is, but it's like, but I'm
Yeah.
questioning. Nobody else is. And
Yeah.
even to this day, my family, my parents in particular, like, where did you come from?
Yeah.
Like, and I'm like, I don't know. Like,
The
I just embrace,
stars.
yeah, like, I embrace it at this particular point. But I mean,
Yeah.
growing
Yeah.
up, I struggled with that a lot. And it's like, oh, well,
Yeah.
Stephanie, this, and oh, she,
Yeah.
maybe you'll ask. And it's like,
Yeah.
but why aren't you? Like, it was very
Yeah.
much something that I've always felt very, very different. So I appreciate you saying
Yeah.
that. And I want to go back to it for a sec. How did you deal with that? I just want to know in terms of like, and this is where I'm being comparative and you shouldn't,
Yeah.
but I felt it so much as a
Yeah.
kid and even
Yeah.
to this day from
Yeah.
peers and how I perceive things and kind of the world. Um,
Yeah.
but I always felt kind of different. And in terms of my own questioning like behavior, and I just want to know. And how
Yeah.
did you deal with that growing up? Always feeling different.
Yeah, I really just shut everything down, right? Like I
Yeah.
shut my authentic self down because I love, and to this day, I love dancing. I love being goofy. I love being silly. And that's why the kids love me because I love that. And that's all that they are. That's all that we are, right? We are playful and joyful and all of that. So I really just shut everything down and then internalize, right? Like I can go back to like moments of time and know exactly what I was thinking, exactly how I was feeling, exactly like what was going on, right? Because I turned into this like master observer, right?
Yeah.
And so that, not of myself though, in the sense, because I didn't know how to kind of label that, like, oh, I have an observer within me, right? I just kind
Right.
of knew that I could observe and like observe myself a little bit. Like I could know that I have these thoughts and stuff and like these feelings, but I never had anyone to talk to about it, right? So it was just like
Absolutely.
you just continue to shut your authentic self down, right? Like real authenticity. So it was just like I turned into whatever robot that my parents like pretty much programmed me to be. And when I do this work with clients, we never ever place blame on anyone else for the programming. It's really about taking full responsibility, right? So really saying, okay, I'm no longer a victim in this and I'm no longer placing blame. So this is on me now to like really reprogram my unconscious mind, right? And so I just want to make that clear. Like I don't hate my parents for like, doing what they knew because that's all they
Absolutely.
know, right?
Correct. Yep.
But I take full responsibility for how I am now, right? So doing my inner work and really seeing myself for who I am, right? So yeah, so to answer your question, I really just shut everything down, right? Like I just shut everything down and just became like this intense observer and like not knowing what to do with it, right? So I just, became really quiet and really, I don't know if I was shy, so to speak, because I always really loved like dancing and being outgoing. So when I got the opportunity, I would, but for the most part, like I really held on to that, like I'm the wild child, I'm the rebellious one, like I lied all the time, right? So then I held on to that belief like I'm a liar, right? So like even like the smallest things I would do, like even last week, like it's still happening because I need to reprogram that and just recognize and really integrate into the truth, right? And so it's like it's not that it's harmful, so to speak. Like I'm not doing anything that's harmful, so to speak, but it's still harmful, right? So it's not like these big lies, but it's like, okay, that's not true,
But
right? Like that's
the ingrainment is so deep,
it's
right? Like
so deep.
it presents itself even today, even after all. And I think it's the
Totally.
journey is ongoing for sure. But
A
I
hundred
have to
percent.
also, what you said, oh, like it hit. It's the idea that even when I talk about my parents on this show, it's actually from such a place of compassion compared to how I dealt with it before. Because
Totally.
looking back on the stages of my own life is I had a lot of, you kind of become robotic, you stop questioning,
Yeah.
you accept the labels of, oh,
Yeah.
I'm definitely different. My
Yeah. Yeah.
relationship, I had a lot of anger, not on the surface.
Mm-hmm.
On the surface, I'm actually was ridiculously chatty and funny and out there.
Yeah.
It was very much in certain ways a mask, and I can see that now.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I had a lot of
Mm-hmm.
anger for a lot of things. It was very much this victim like mentality. I wasn't doing it
Yeah.
consciously, but I had
Yeah.
a lot of anger in a lot of ways. And then
Mm-hmm.
coming into kind of my own work and in and now the lens I have for my family is that of which so much more compassion. And I think we get along so much better now. And that is because I'm able to say, you can only work with the tools that you have.
Totally. Yeah.
And my parents only had the tools that they had. You did the
Mm-hmm.
best, you do, and even us today, like as parents, and you do the best you can. And it
Mm-hmm.
is from that lens that I can see that now. And
Mm-hmm.
because of that, I have so much less anger. But there is
Mm-hmm.
accountability for myself. I'm an adult
Mm-hmm.
now. I'm a mom. I'm a wife. I have my, my own little unit, if you will, my own place in
Mm-hmm.
this world. But at the same time, I have to take responsibility for that. So if I want
Mm-hmm.
things to be different, I have to initiate that difference. It's nobody
Mm-hmm.
else's responsibility anymore.
Yeah.
And there is that accountability. So when you know better, you do better. And
Mm-hmm.
because of that, I can look back and just release a lot of that anger. Some I'm still working on myself, but
Yeah,
like
for sure.
a lot of it is understanding that kind of compassion and what it took for me to get there, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also,
It's
oh, sorry, no, go ahead.
yeah, it's deeply ingrained, right? So whatever is like is like, it's like whatever you had to go through, like
Mhm.
as like a kind of a main traumatic event. So for me, it was like the ongoing of just my authentic self, right? So like still digging, I'm still, right? Because it is ongoing and it's not, I feel like I took like a year off and was like, I'm good, I healed, I'm good, right? And it's like now it's
Yep.
hitting me again, because it's like whatever that year of like being off from doing your own inner work, and now it's like there's veils, right? So like we can, if we have a traumatic event, we kind of like blanket it with a veil, right? So it's like, okay, now it's not as painful. And then we continue to pile on, right? With all the other experiences. So when you're ready to do the inner work, those veils are released and you're like, oh God, that's there.
Here we
Okay.
go.
Right. Here we go. Yeah. So it's been like since the beginning of this year has just been like, you know, digging and digging and digging. So it's a beautiful process because you're just like so much clearer after you have that, right? So it's so important to do that. And yeah, the relationships change, so I can see where my parents are at, I can see where certain teachers along the way are at, and so I can just, I can call them out. I can say like, well, that's kind of a projection, so what is that for you,
Right.
right? Yeah, so
And I think
mhm.
too, just to also echo that as well, having certain conversations, because having conversations with empathy
Mhm.
and lack of judgment, which I'm learning, like the conversations I have had with myself and the conversations I've had now with, let's say, parents or close friends, or is that very thing, this idea of projection and this idea. I
Mhm.
remember talking to family members and them, I can't remember the context, but it was a superstitious like thing that we do. And I remember I'm like, why do we do that?
Mm.
And I didn't, I wasn't coming from, an accusational, judgmental kind of place. I'm like, no, like I'm really asking, like, why do we do that? And I
Mhm.
remember being in the living room and nobody could answer me.
Mm.
And again, It's that label, that label of, oh, Steph's at it again. It's like, no,
Yeah.
I'm not. I'm actually asking, like, I really genuinely want to have this conversation. Why are
Yeah.
we doing this? Why do
Yeah.
we do this? And
Yeah.
and it was one of, and I remember it was around the holidays a few years ago. And it was because I questioned it. It actually engaged a conversation
Mm-hmm.
about, well, my dad did it. Why did he do? Oh, I remember what. And then it became that. And I remember feeling, for the first time, I felt seen, I felt heard. And it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
that we solved anything, or it wasn't even like that. It was just having open conversation.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
all it was about. It was having open conversations. And I know that we walked out of there. Not everybody, liked it, agreed, but it didn't
Yeah.
matter. It didn't matter. It was just that we were able to finally have a conversation where nobody felt offended, where
Yeah.
nobody felt like attacked, because that was not the intention. But it was
Yeah.
just about that engagement of conversation that
Mm-hmm.
is so important. And again, this idea of the whys and the projection and what's
Yeah.
coming up for us,
Yeah.
for us. And
Yeah.
yeah, and that, I think that is so,
It's
so important to
huge.
continue. Yeah,
Yeah, it's huge because that's why relationships end. I'm not
yeah,
talking about just intimate relationships, I'm talking all relationships.
right.
That's why they end, because they're not doing their inner healing, right? They're not
Yeah,
seeing their cycles, their patterns, their thoughts, their all of that, because it's just a process. We have a false identity or a self-limiting belief, which then is created into thought or narrative, right? So instead of just the fact, I went to the store and I didn't have enough money to get all the groceries I wanted, right? But then we create a whole narrative of like, I'm not worthy, I'm broke, I'm this, I'm that. Like it goes into a whole thing, right?
right.
And so then you end up losing it on the cashier because she rung something in wrong, right? Like it's just, that's how it goes. So we have this limiting belief. Then it comes through thought form, then it comes through emotions, and then it comes through a behavior, right? And so if we're not mindful and aware of like all of these layers, then we're just lashing out based off of our own limitations, right? So, it's really important to do our own inner work, but also to, once we have that inner work, like we're doing it and we're engaged in it, how can we help others, right? How can we help others see what they're doing in a kind and compassionate way, right? So
Yeah,
it's really just having, yeah, like you said, those beautiful, open, raw, vulnerable conversations, because nothing changes if we're not willing to be vulnerable,
yes,
right?
and oh, good lord, yes, good lord. I just made up a word. Good lord. I don't know what I just said. It just came out. Let's go with it. Um, I think too, part of this work that I'm still, good lord, dissecting myself, but
Mm,
it's I call them, some other work that I'm also doing. It's called the magical darks.
mm,
So I think that our body stores feelings, events, traumas, and until we deal with
mhm,
them, they will show up, like you said, lashing out at a cashier. Like they will
mhm.
show up in so many different ways. And
All the time.
I will speak for myself in terms of weight gain, or
Mm,
um, I, I I had two babies within almost 2 years, and so
mhm,
there was hormonal imbalances, food imbalances, depressive states, like things, disconnects from partners and friends, and things were coming up that, like I said, I didn't understand.
mhm,
And looking back on it, it was just, I call them magical darks, because
mhm,
in order to really figure out our own truths, we have to experience and go through, however scary and traumatic,
mhm.
we have to sort of really face our own shit, basically. And it is the
100%.
hardest thing I think I've personally ever done
Mhm,
in that
mhm,
time. And it was in the messiest parts of myself and the darkest parts of myself that I had to go through and come out of, and now have a better sense of things in terms of
mhm.
my own, like you said, my own alignment, my own, what am I not dealing with?
Yeah.
What is coming up for me? And it was through
Mhm,
that. Now, when you say, and I bring that up because you had said you have to sort of work on your own truths, figure out your own truths.
mhm,
How does a person do that? So when a person comes to you and myself, for example. Let's just use me. I'm cool with it. Let's just use
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
I remember I came to you. Well, we, again, not intentionally. It was, looking back on it, it was so serendipitous, really, because it was
Yeah.
one of the darker points of my life, because I had
Mm.
just had, and this was ongoing years back, like things were leading up. But I remember I was at one of my lowest, my heaviest in terms of weight, balance, all that, work life, like it was all of it. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember I connected with you because I saw something on social media about sound baths.
Mm.
Remember it, and I'd be like, what is this? And then I connected and messaged, and then we started chatting. So then, in connecting with you and your work and sort of how that kind of happened, you asked me a series of questions.
Mm.
And in doing the work, and I remember the questions, I will get into all of it, but when you say a person needs to sort of find their truth, how does
Mm-hmm.
a person do that? Like,
Yeah.
how, when someone comes to you and you know that there are things bubbling, like you yourself can see it, the person can't see
Mm.
it because they're in it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and how do we do this? How can a person? It's such a huge question. I'm very aware because everyone's different, but
Yeah.
how do you start by really sort of to turn that mirror in terms of that reflective nature and
Yeah.
align with your own truth? How do you find it?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways, to be
Right.
honest, but for me, I love a good question. Right?
Yes, you
Like
do, and they are good.
that's
I just want to say
yeah,
that they're good.
yeah, it's all about questions. So, um, you know, with my background in social work, that's kind of what we do, right? Is we ask questions, but you got to ask good questions.
Yep.
Even though that's a judgment, there's no good or bad, but it's really about like an evolving question. So for me, what I mean, and it's evolved, right, of like how I get to know the truth of myself, but it's really about getting to know what limitations you're putting on yourself, right? So limitations could be, I'm not deserving of celebrating my life. I'm n- I'm I never win. That was a big one that came up actually recently. So, when we go and like we get the lottery ticket and we have this belief like, well, I never win anyway, so what's the point? But you get it anyway. So you're
Right.
limiting yourself by saying, well, I never win. So we know the universe only says yes, and so it is. So if you say I never win, then you never friggin' win, right? So we have to, once we recognize that kind of self-limiting thought or belief about ourselves, we have to maybe go back in time to see, where did I even implant that into my unconscious mind? What event did I go through? And through that event, I decided in mind that I'm not good enough. I never win. I'm not worthy of celebrating. I'm broke. I'm never going to have my needs met. Like, there's so many things. So it's like, for me, the biggest question is like, what is my relationship with my dog? What is my relationship with my husband? And how do I see myself in that? So what are the stories that I'm telling myself about my relationship with money, with food, with my husband, with my dog, with my baby, with banks, with taxes? Like, you literally have a relationship with everything,
Right.
right? So it's like, okay, what do I desire to be? Who do I desire to be? And what am I? And I'm not saying like, oh, I'm someone who's kind and compassionate and loving and whatever. I'm saying, you're asking yourself, who are you in this relationship? And you're asking for all the shit to come up. You're asking to see it for point blank. I am someone who lies. That was like a big thing because I was told, you're a liar. You lie all the time. Tell the truth. And it's like, we're never taught how to tell the truth, right? In the sense of like not just speaking truth, but knowing truth. We're never taught that. We're only told lie and you go to hell. We're never told find truth and it will set you free, right? Like that's literally a scripture. That's a text, quote from the Bible. Like, the truth
My
shall set you free.
my favorite one was, and even though it's absolutely true, I remember being told God is within you. And I remember as
Yeah.
a kid, first of all, I very much actually agree with this divine presence actually is within ourselves. But I remember being a
Um,
kid and being like,
yeah.
what the hell does that mean? I remember
Yeah.
that, like, no, God's within you. I'm like, is he? Like,
Yeah.
can he? Like,
Wasn't, yeah.
I remember that. Like, and
Yeah.
I tried asking that question and I got no answer. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, who's
Yeah.
within me? I'm within me. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's funny. I'm like, I'm
The
like, no, I'm like,
divine.
nothing
Yeah.
for that.
I hear you.
But
Because we're
I,
human and we're being, right? So
yeah,
we're human, which is physical and the mind and all of
right.
that. But then there's also the beingness of us, which is the divinity, the sovereign being that we are,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And so it's, yeah. So I would say, like, really just take inventory of your beliefs around your dreams. What are your dreams? Why can't you have your dreams come true? If we know how powerful we are, that if we look back on time and recognize, oh, we have all these limiting beliefs. If I'm not worthy, I'm not deserving of, I can never win, I'll never find love, real love doesn't exist, like all of these limitations that we've put on ourselves, and we see, holy shit, I'm actually still living those beliefs out. That's exactly what my life is right now today. That's power.
Yeah,
That's super powerful. So imagine if you go to the other side of abundance, of truth, right? Because the lack is and scarcity is just illusion. It's not based in truth, right? It's
absolutely.
just based in self limitations. It's based in trauma, right? It's based in programming and conditioning. So imagine if we flip, because the universe can be an abundance of lack or abundance of abundance, right? So if we go onto the other side of only abundance of joy and peace and money and gratitude and love and everything, then yeah, you're going to see it from a totally different perspective, and you're going to recognize, wow, my dreams actually can be real. They can be happening right now.
I will be transparent and I will tell you what it did for me. So these were
Yeah.
questions that you asked me that set everything in motion. And it was again, I just want to, the context is me coming to you with just a lot of like frazzleness in my brain. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember talking to you and you asked me a couple of things. The first thing was, why can't you sit still? Like, no, like, and it was real, like, and it wasn't just the physicality, although that
Yeah.
plays a very real thing, like my physical, like, anxiousness of like my
Yeah.
inability to sit still and like
Mm.
enjoy a cartoon with my, like, a full cartoon episode with my kid. I couldn't do it. Like, I had to
Yeah.
get up and do something. So like you literally asked, like, what you need to ask yourself,
Mm-hmm.
why can't you sit still? And I'd
Mm-hmm.
be like, because I'm busy. I remember, I'm busy, woman. Like, I got stuff to do. And then I remember, and you said to me indirectly, I mean, this was going back a few years, but
Yeah.
you basically said, but do you actually have to do them? I'm like, no,
Mm.
I do.
Yeah.
You're
I
like,
gotta do the laundry.
yeah, like, I have to do laundry or I don't have
Yeah.
clean underwear. That's real.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then you left it like that. That was one of the first questions was, why can't you sit still? And
Mm.
then and that it set me off, like the questioning of that set me off, like where like I started taking inventory, like I
Yeah.
became so much more, I'm like, almost like I can do it, yeah, I can.
Yeah.
I can watch a
Yeah.
full episode of Paw Patrol, yeah, I can. And then I remember like sitting there with my son and my daughter, my leg was shaking, I'm just like, oh my god, like I can't, how much it really was a struggle for me. I'm like,
Yeah.
what the hell, like this is
Mm-hmm.
not complicated. Like, why can't I? Oh my God. That was
Mm.
number one.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second question, I'm laughing because I've heard this all my life, but it hit different when you said it. And you said to me, you're like, why do you always fill the silences? And
Mm.
I was like, what? I'm like, oh, like I talk a lot. And that was programming. That was my
Mm-hmm.
whole life. I talk a lot. And I realized I do not talk a lot. I am just
Mm.
loud. Like I am the
Mm.
loudest one in the room because my voice, like I'm loud. So
Mm.
I feel like even when I'm not really talking a lot in a group, I've always been categorized as that because
Mm.
I like being funny and silly and all those kind of things. But my voice is always the loudest. So I remember being in school and I always got in trouble for talking. Where it's like, well, I wasn't talking, like he was or she was, but you don't hear them because they know how to whisper, and I didn't. You hear me. So that label was just like, so I can, like, you asked me that question and I just responded automatically. Oh, I've always been like a chatterbox. I'm always talking.
Yeah.
And then you're like, yeah, but why do you fill silences? And I was like, I don't know. Like, and again, I left with it and I went and did my own thing. And then it was over time where I realized I don't like silences. And then it's like, okay, why? Like, why can't you just sit? Like, why can't you? And then it just became this huge, like, triggering thing for me, and my anxiousness and this inability for people not to think I'm interesting or smart, or like so many things kind of came up with that. Or like, I'm not unless I'm being funny or silly or like always filling those gaps, like I'm not interesting enough to sit with. Like those types of things were like, it started like bubbling up, and I was like, holy shit, it was 2 questions. Like, this was 2 questions, man. And like, and so I'm laughing because like I'm not going to keep going, but you get the idea that it was in terms of this idea of how to align with self, find your own truth. It is very much asking those questions. It is not being afraid of the answers, because I'm still dissecting all this shit. Like, I'm still going through these sort of ingrainment, where this stuff came from, how it sits with me, how I'm projecting it, not intentionally, but I am having that dance with the universe about where this stuff came from and how I sort of understand myself. And I had to get really comfortable in the magical darks of what was. I had to. And then meditation happened, but meditation happened slowly, because I always heard people talking about meditation and sitting with yourself, and I'm like, you guys are nuts. Like, if you think I can sit here for like 5-10 minutes,
I can't watch Paw Patrol. How can I
watch Paw Patrol, people? Like, you guys have no idea. And it's like, then meditation happens slowly, but it becomes addictive. That is 100%. And the sort of self-assurance of like, no, I'm interesting enough that I want to sit with myself.
Totally.
And that is still something is ongoing for me, but that happens slowly. And as things, again, I probably can do, maybe, I think I'm at 10 minutes right now, which is fine.
Amazing.
But we're talking like, that took 2 years. Like, that's taken time where I can still myself, sit with myself. What comes up? Okay, how do I deal with it? I will journal. I will write it out. I'm very visual. I have to see it, like visually put it in front of me to see it. And then I start kind of working within it, working backwards. But those are just kind of, I want to highlight those are ways that I've kind of dealt with it, in hopes that if anybody can resonate with that or take from that what they will. But there's just no way to deal with the bad and not the good. Like, they're very packaged. It's a package deal.
I'll never, there's like this thing in the spiritual community now, I feel, is like positive toxicity, right? So it's like, just stay positive, just be positive. It's like, no, we actually have to 100% recognize the not so positive. Right. So it's not that we judge the positive or the negative, but that's kind of how science works, right? Positive and negative. So, there is traumatic events that we have, that we are in a heightened state of negative emotion. And we have to look at that. We have to go in and re-experience that from an observer perspective. Right. So where, as soon as you come into the observer perspective, you're detaching from the narrative, right? So the narrative of like, well, they did this because of this, and then I did that because of that. Like, there's no backstory. There's no meaning to what exactly happened, right? So then, when you're going into, let's say, like one pretty traumatic thing is like being sexually abused, right? Like, let's just get real here. That's a pretty big one, and it runs rampant in our world, right? And so what happens is, when you go in to re-experience that, you're literally just saying the details of what happened. There's no what you come out of it is the limitations that you've placed in your unconscious mind, right? What did you decide in mind at that moment? Well, I'm not good enough. My body isn't sacred. I'm only good for this, right? Men can't be trusted. I don't like, whatever it is. Like, there's so many things that come, but we have to go into that place and re-experience it from an observer perspective to see just straight up what it is, to neutralize the emotion, right? To neutralize that negative, high intense emotion, and then to see, oh, I commanded that into my unconscious mind. I made that decision in mind. So then from that experience on, you see how you live out, I'm not worthy, I'm only deserving of this, my body's not sacred, right? Then it turns into like food issue, like it's a whole thing, right? And then you get to declare something new for yourself. You get to declare truth. I am worthy of having an unconditional, loving relationship with my partner, right? And you make these new declarations that are based in truth. And I only see through the abundance of unconditional love. And I am able to be vulnerable and share what I need to share, like, and express myself, right? You get to make these new declarations. Those are based in truth.
Right. Out of
Right?
something very ugly that obviously, like, not by no fault did this happen. And sort of
No.
how do you go back into, I see exactly what you mean. You have to experience that from the observer in order to
Yeah.
understand this happened to me. It is
Yeah.
not my fault. This is what happened, but I'm going to take this experience and grow from it,
Yes.
alleviate this sort of what's ingrainment of the ingrainment of society and like what this can label me as, but more
Mm-hmm.
so going to take this
Mm-hmm.
experience, go forward, and create an absolute new truth and identity for myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
So it's really just doing that, right? Like, and
yeah,
again, like, question, like, the biggest question I ask is, where's that come from? Right? Like,
right.
I have a
Yes.
thought or I have a behavior. I'm like, where's that coming from? Right?
That
And
that
you
is so hard. Yeah.
see, right? You see down the line of like, oh, I've had this like behavior or habit for like so long, right? And we're so codependent on things. Codependency is just where we're giving our power away, right? We're giving our power away to money. We're giving our power away to our children. We're giving our power away to our partners. We're giving our power away to taxes. We're giving our, like, we're literally codependent on like so many things, right? Drugs, alcohol, whatever it is, you
Yeah.
know?
That
So
is,
if we have to take inventory, like, create a beautiful sacred space in your place, in your home, with some candles and, earth elements and all the elements, and really just sit with yourself. Like, I'm not, when people are like, oh, I journaled, it's like, you're not journaling about having a good day or a bad day. You're
right.
journaling about like, okay, today I want to take inventory of why I resist doing my taxes. Why do you resist it? Because if you're owing money, that means you made a shit ton of money. You want to owe. You want to owe lots and lots of taxes. You want to owe it, right? Because that means that you made lots and lots of money, right? But we dread it for some reason. So what's the resistance with that? Why am I resisting going for a walk? Like, whatever it is, it's whatever it is.
That yes, very yes to highlight. Like, you're right. The idea of when we journal, what does that mean? When we meditate, what does that mean? Well, it's not about sitting
Yeah.
like clearing your mind and being at peace. Not necessarily. It's about what it
No.
takes to get there. I mean, yeah, hopefully, yeah. I mean, you can get
Yeah.
there, but again,
Yeah.
you're right to identify it takes time. It takes practice. Do 30 seconds, do 1 minute. Create a little
Mm-hmm.
space in your place, like you said, whether that's a corner. I remember talking to someone about when we were talking about like a little area like to meditate together, and she's like, "Oh, I have no space in my I have no space in my house." And I remember being like, "It can be a closet." Like
Yeah.
it again, we look for those blocks, right? Like we look for
Yeah.
them. I am just as guilty of that, for the record. Like reasons
Yeah.
why we can't, where it's like it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be this like expensive mat. Like just
Yeah.
sit in a corner.
Yeah.
Let's do this together. Like let's just
Yeah.
do it. Like if we're gonna
Yeah.
journal it, let's write out some, like, you're right. Oh, I had this for dinner. No, 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 it's not about that.
Yeah.
Get
Yeah.
comfortable to get dark, and like to the best that you can to figure out what it is that is not sitting well with with yourself, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Please tell everyone about your services, about your company, because people need to know about it. They need to know about it. So how do they get in contact with you? But tell us also about how you came to this place for it.
Yeah, right now it is called Arts of Compassionate Healing, but it's going to be turning into A.R.T Academy, so authentically rediscovering truth. So it's going to be catered to post-secondary students that really need help finding their path, their purpose amongst like the chaos of what university and college and post-secondary really brings. um but I mean, that's just where I'm going with it, because I really am being called to that area and that sector right now. But the biggest thing is just really doing trauma work. Like, that's really just what I do, right? So
Yep.
just going into past events that have happened and really seeing what we decide in mind, and then seeing how that one moment in time when you were 4 years old, you've literally lived out those self limitations and false beliefs until probably today.
Yeah.
So it's really just getting real and just having, yes, these beautiful conversations too, right? And helping clients reprogram their unconscious mind, but also making new declarations for themselves, right? Based in truth, right? Based in the knowingness that we all have. So
Right.
yeah, so that's kind of that's really the main part of my practice. So like I said, I'm transitioning into this new kind of realm, but it feels pretty familiar, so we'll see where it takes me anyways.
That's amazing. That is,
Yeah.
and I also, from experience in terms of university, it is a
Mm-hmm.
huge, huge point in time in terms of
Oh, oh
like
my gosh. Yeah.
my best years, my most challenging years,
Yeah.
personal self discoveries in terms of being away from, I mean, being away from home and living on your own. Yes, like those, yes. But
Yeah.
also, it's one of the only times in my life where I have had a specific amount of time to grow, develop, focus on questioning, focus on
Mm,
learning. Um, it was a really, like, looking back on it, it was a really special time for me
yeah.
that I got to experience. And the academics weren't even the most important part, that's for sure. I
Yeah.
mean, we were there, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
obviously, but
Yeah.
more so my, like, personal growth in terms of those years, for sure. So that's
Hmm.
amazing.
Yeah. It's gonna be fun.
Well, thank you very much, my love, for doing this. I
Yeah, my
truly,
pleasure.
truly appreciate it. And
Hmm.
I'm gonna stop the recording, but don't go
Okay.
anywhere.